The silence of the Cascade Forest wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the glass of a car window, demanding to be let in. Madison Carter gripped the steering wheel of her beat-up sedan, her knuckles white against the cracked leather. The digital clock on the dashboard blinked a neon green accusation, 2:47 a.m. She shouldn't be here. The thought wasn't hers. It was an echo of her mother's voice, a ghost that had been haunting her for 3 months now. Rebecca Carter had been a woman of strange rules and tea leaves, a woman who treated the night like a locked door that should never be opened. "Sorry, Mom," Madison whispered, her breath fogging the cold air inside the car. "But the rent is due, and spooky forest photos are trending." She reached for her camera bag on the passenger seat. It was a heavy, professional rig, the last gift Rebecca had given her before the cancer took her. Madison treated it better than she treated herself. She checked the ISO settings, her fingers moving with practiced muscle memory. She was about to open the car door when she heard it. It didn't start as a sound. It started as a vibration. It rattled the loose change in her cup holder. It hummed in the hollow of her chest. Then, the sound tore through the canopy.
What?
It was a howl. Yes. But calling it a howl felt like calling a hurricane a breeze. It was a melody, a dark baritone sorrow that curled around the pine trees and slid through the cracks in her weather stripping. It was mournful, terrifying, and seductive. Madison froze. Her instinct, the human part of her, screamed drive. It screamed, turn the key and run. But her hands didn't listen. Her hands lifted the camera. She hit the video record button. Through the lens, the forest looked like a graveyard of shadows. The moonlight cut through the branches in jagged silver spears. And there, in the distance, something moved. Shadows, massive, fluid shadows that didn't move like deer or bears. They moved like liquid smoke. They were circling the base of a giant fir tree. The howl came again, closer this time. It made her skin prickle. It made her nipples harden against the lace of her bra. It was a physical sensation, a wave of heat that contradicted the freezing Oregon night. "What are you?" she breathed, the camera shaking slightly in her grip. She recorded for 4 minutes, 4 minutes of guttural growls, shifting shadows, and that haunting, impossible song. When the silence finally returned, it was sudden, violent, like a door slamming shut. Madison lowered the camera. She felt drained, as if the sound had siphoned the energy right out of her veins. She looked out the window into the pitch black. For a split second, 2 points of gold flashed in the darkness, eyes watching her. The primal fear finally kicked in. Madison threw the car into reverse, tires screeching against the gravel, and spun the wheel. She drove down the mountain pass as if the devil himself were in the back seat. She didn't know it yet, but she had just signed her own death warrant, or perhaps an invitation. 1 week later, the internet was a hungry beast, and Madison had just fed it a steak. She sat in her cramped apartment in Portland, staring at her laptop screen. The view count on YouTube was ticking upwards so fast it made her dizzy. 2, 3, 40, 102 views. The title she'd chosen was Simple, Unexplained Howl in Cascade Ridge. The comments were a war zone. Half were skeptics calling it CGI. The other half were cryptozoologists losing their minds. Madison scrolled down, sipping lukewarm coffee. She was about to close the laptop when a notification popped up, a new comment, pinned to the top by the algorithm because of its sudden engagement. Shadow Watcher 2891, you've opened a door you didn't know existed. Delete this, now, before they find you. A chill, sharp and uneasy, raced down her spine. It felt ridiculous. It was just a troll. The internet was full of keyboard warriors trying to be edgy. She moved the cursor to the delete button on the comment, hovering there. Bzzzt. Her phone vibrated against the wooden desk, making her jump. She spilled coffee onto her sleeve. Damn it! she hissed, dabbing at the stain. She looked at the phone, unknown number. She ignored it. It rang again immediately. Madison picked it up, her heart doing a nervous flutter in her ribs. "Hello, Miss Carter." The voice was rich, dark, like 80% cocoa chocolate melted over gravel. It had an accent she couldn't place old world, aristocratic, dangerous. "Who is this?" Madison asked, her grip tightening on the phone. "My name is Ethan Blackthorne," the man said. There was no hesitation in his voice. He spoke with the authority of a man who owned the airwaves he was transmitting on. "We need to talk, now." "I don't know you," Madison said, reaching to end the call, "and I'm not interested in buying whatever. I'm not selling anything." He cut her off. His tone dropped an octave. It was almost a growl. "I'm trying to keep you alive. I'm outside your apartment." Madison stopped breathing. She stood up slowly, moving toward the window that overlooked the street. Her apartment was on the second floor of a brick walk-up in a quiet neighborhood. She peeked through the blinds. There was a car parked directly in front of the building. It was a sleek black sedan, likely worth more than her entire building. The engine was idling, a low purr that vibrated in the streetlights. Standing next to it was a man. Even from this distance, he was overwhelming. He was tall, easily over 6'2", with shoulders that strained against the fabric of an impeccably tailored black suit. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't looking at the street. He was looking directly up at her window. He saw her. Through the blinds, through the dark. "Let me up, Madison," the voice on the phone said. It wasn't a request. "Or I'll come up anyway, and I'd prefer not to break your door." Madison hung up. Her mind was racing. Call the police. Grab a knife, run. But the way he had said her name, it hadn't sounded like a threat. It sounded like possession. She walked to the door, her legs feeling like lead. She unlocked the deadbolt, the click echoing loudly in the small room. Before she could even turn the handle, the door pushed open. Ethan Blackthorne stepped inside. The first thing that hit her was the smell. He smelled like a storm. He smelled like ozone, rain-soaked pine needles, and something distinctly masculine musk and expensive scotch. It was intoxicating. It made her mouth water before her brain could tell her to be afraid. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the world. Up close, he was devastating. He had a jawline that looked carved from granite and eyes that were so dark they seemed to swallow the light. His hair was jet black, swept back messily, as if he had run his hands through it in frustration. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a hand. He just stared at her. He stared at her with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. His gaze started at her eyes, dropped to her lips, tracked down the curve of her throat, and lingered on the pulse jumping frantically there. Madison backed up until her hips hit the kitchen counter. You can't just walk in here." Ethan took a step forward. He moved with a predator's grace, silent, fluid, leashed power. The room suddenly felt very, very small. "I can do whatever is necessary to contain a leak," he said softly. His voice vibrated in the floorboards. "You posted a video, Madison, a video of things that are not meant for human eyes." "It was just wolves," she stammered, trying to find her courage. She crossed her arms over her chest, a flimsy shield against his presence. "It's nature photography. It's not illegal." Ethan laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He closed the distance between them until he was standing mere inches away. The heat radiating off him was incredible. It was like standing next to a furnace. "Wolves," he repeated, testing the word. He leaned in. He leaned in so close that his breath, hot and smelling of mint, brushed against her ear. "Tell me, Madison," he whispered, sending a shiver raking down her spine that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the sudden, heavy tension in her lower belly. "Do wolves sing like that? Do wolves make you feel? He paused. He inhaled deeply, his nose grazing the sensitive skin just below her earlobe. He was sniffing her, blatantly sniffing her. Do they make you feel like you want to run into the dark and join them? Madison's breath hitched. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. I don't know what you're talking about. Ethan pulled back slightly, just enough to look into her eyes again. His pupils were blown wide. Swallowing the iris, he looked hungry, not for food. You have a scent, he murmured, his voice rougher now. It's faint, buried under vanilla soap and fear, but it's there. What scent? She whispered. She couldn't look away. Trouble, he said. Delete the video. Madison. And if I don't... Ethan placed a hand on the counter on either side of her hips, caging her in. He lowered his head until their foreheads were almost touching. The air between them crackled with static electricity. Your mother warned you about the night, didn't she? He asked softly. Madison's eyes widened. How do you know about... She knew what was out there, and he interrupted. She was a smart woman. I suggest you listen to wisdom from the grave, Miss Carter, because your ignorance has attracted something far darker than you could ever imagine. He pushed off the counter, the loss of his body heat leaving her instantly cold. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a black card with gold lettering. He slid it into the pocket of her oversized cardigan, his knuckles grazing the swell of her breast through the thin fabric. The touch burned. Call me if anything unusual happens, he said, turning toward the door. If you feel like you're being watched, if anyone approaches you in the dark, trust no one. Except you, Madison challenged, finding her voice. Ethan paused with his hand on the doorknob. He looked back over his shoulder. The harsh overhead light caught the sharp angle of his cheekbone. Especially not me, he said. And then he was gone. 3 days passed. 3 days of Madison jumping at every shadow. She had deleted the video. She had scrubbed it from YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. But the internet was forever. Rip-offs and re-uploads were already circulating on conspiracy forums. She couldn't focus on work. Her editing software sat open. A wedding shoot waiting to be color graded. But all she could see were those dark eyes. Ethan Blackthorne. She had Googled him, of course. CEO of Obsidian Corporation, a private security firm and tech conglomerate that seemed to own half the Pacific Northwest. The photos of him online were distant, cold paparazzi shots of him entering galas or leaving boardrooms. He looked human in the photos. But in her kitchen, with his scent filling her lungs, he hadn't felt human. He felt like a force of nature. Madison grabbed her keys. She needed coffee. She needed to get out of the apartment that still smelled faintly of him. It was a gray, drizzly afternoon in Portland. She walked 2 blocks to her favorite coffee shop, the Roasted Bean. As she waited in line, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. It was a specific sensation, a prickling awareness. She glanced toward the window. Across the street, standing under the awning of a dry cleaner, was a man in a gray hoodie. His hands were buried in his pockets. His face was obscured by the hood, but his posture was rigid, focused. He was looking right at her. Madison shook her head. Paranoia. She told herself, Ethan got in your head. She got her latte and left. She walked a different route to the camera repair shop to drop off a lens. When she walked out of the shop 20 minutes later, she saw him again. Gray hoodie standing by a bus stop, just watching. This time, fear coiled in her stomach. She walked faster, clutching her coffee cup like a weapon. She ducked into a bookstore, weaving through the aisles, and exited through the back door. She ran the last 3 blocks home. She fumbled with her keys at her apartment door, dropping them once. Come on, she muttered. She got inside and slammed the door, locking all 3 locks. She leaned back against the wood, gasping for air. She was safe. Then she looked up. Her apartment had been tossed, Books were pulled off shelves. Her drawers were dumped onto the floor. Her mattress was overturned. But it wasn't a robbery. Her TV was there. Her laptop was on the desk. Except the laptop was smashed. The screen was cracked in a spiderweb pattern. And the external hard drive, the one where she kept her backups, was gone. The backup of the video. "Oh, God," Madison whispered. Thump. The sound came from the bedroom closet. Madison grabbed the closest thing to her, a heavy ceramic vase on the entry table. She held it up, her hands shaking violently. "Who's there?" she screamed. "I called the police. They're on their way." A lie, a desperate lie. The closet door creaked open. It wasn't the gray hoodie guy. It was Ethan. He stepped out of the shadows of her closet as if he had materialized from the darkness itself. He looked furious. His suit jacket was gone, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and dusted with dark hair. "You didn't call the police," he said calmly, "and you shouldn't." Madison almost dropped the vase. You broke into my house. You destroyed my things." "I didn't do this," Ethan said, gesturing to the chaos. He stepped over a pile of clothes, moving toward her. "I came here because my perimeter alarms tripped. Someone was here before me." "The guy in the gray hoodie," Madison whispered. Ethan stopped, his eyes narrowed to slits. "You saw him." "Twice. He was following me." Ethan cursed, a low, guttural sound that sounded more animal than human. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He grabbed her upper arms. His grip was firm, bruising, possessive. "Listen to me, Madison. We have to leave, right now." "What? No, I'm not going anywhere with you." She tried to pull away, but he was like a statue. "They have your scent now," Ethan growled, giving her a small shake. The hard drive was just the start. "They want the source. They want you." "Who are they?" she yelled. "The hunters. The ones who don't want the world to know that monsters are real." He looked down at her, and for the first time, Madison saw something other than arrogance in his eyes. She saw fear, not for himself, for her. "Please," he said, the word rough. "I promised I would keep you safe." "Promised who? Does it matter right now?" A sound shattered the moment. The window in the living room exploded inward. Glass sprayed across the floor, a canister a small, metal cylinder rolled across the carpet. Hissing, thick, green gas began to spew from it. "Silver gas," Ethan roared. He didn't hesitate. He scooped Madison up into his arms as if she weighed nothing, one arm under her knees, one around her back. He pressed her face into his shoulder. "Don't breathe," he ordered. "Hold your breath. Madison." He ran, not out the front door, but toward the back of the apartment, toward the fire escape. He kicked the back door open, the wood splintering around the lock. They burst out into the cool night air. Ethan didn't stop. He leaped over the railing of the balcony. Madison screamed into his shirt. They were on the 2nd floor. They hit the ground with a heavy thud, but Ethan didn't collapse. His knees bent to absorb the impact, and he kept moving, sprinting toward the alleyway where his black car was waiting. He threw the back door open and shoved her inside. He dove into the driver's seat. "Seatbelt," he barked. As the engine roared to life, a monstrous, powerful sound, Madison looked back at her apartment building. Shadows were moving on the fire escape, figures jumping down with impossible agility. "What is happening?" Madison cried, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the buckle. "Ethan, what are you—" Ethan tore out of the alley, tires smoking. He drifted onto the main road, weaving through traffic at 80 miles an hour. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. His eyes were glowing, actually glowing, a faint iridescent gold in the darkness of the car. "I told you, Miss Carter," he said, his voice dropping into that seductive, terrifying baritone. "I'm the one who knows what's in the dark. He reached across the center console. His hand, large, warm, and steady, covered her trembling knee. His thumb rubbed soothing circles against her jeans, a gesture that was shockingly intimate amidst the chaos. "I'm taking you to sanctuary," he said, "deep in the forest, my forest." Madison stared at his hand on her leg. The heat of his skin seemed to seep through the denim, branding her. She should be terrified. She was being kidnapped by a man with glowing eyes who could jump off buildings. But as his thumb stroked her leg, a strange sensation washed over her, a calm, a feeling of rightness. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why go to all this trouble for a stranger?" Ethan kept his eyes on the road, his jaw clenched tight. "Because," he said quietly, "when I walked into your apartment 3 days ago, I didn't just smell trouble." He glanced at her, and the heat in his gaze made her toes curl. "I smelled peaches and rain. I smelled the only thing that has ever made my wolf stop pacing." "Your wolf?" Madison blinked. Ethan smiled then, a sharp, predatory smile that promised wicked things. "Welcome to the pack, Madison. Try not to get eaten." The iron gates of Shadow Pine groaned shut behind them, sealing out the world. They drove up a winding gravel path lined with Douglas firs, so tall they seemed to scrape the belly of the storm clouds. The rain had started in earnest now, drumming a heavy, rhythmic beat against the roof of the car. Madison didn't look at Ethan. She couldn't. If she looked at him, she might scream, or worse, she might lean closer. The heat radiating from his body was making the inside of the luxury sedan feel like a sauna. The car stopped in front of a structure that was less a house and more a fortress of glass and dark timber. It was modern, sharp-edged, and aggressive, jutting out of the mountainside like a jagged tooth. "Get out," Ethan said. His voice was tight, strained. Madison fumbled with the handle. As soon as she stepped out, the freezing rain soaked her cardigan, but before the chill could settle into her bones, a suit jacket was draped over her shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled overwhelmingly of hemp cedarwood and something wilder, like ozone before a lightning strike. Ethan didn't touch her with his hands, but the weight of his jacket felt like an embrace. "Inside, now," he commanded, ushering her toward the massive oak double doors. The interior of Shadow Pine was vast. The foyer had ceilings 20 feet high, dominated by a stone fireplace large enough to roast an entire ox. The fire was already roaring, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. An older woman stood by the stairs. She wore a simple gray dress and had hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Rebecca," Ethan greeted her with a nod. "Prepare the East Wing guest suite." Madison froze. "Rebecca." The woman turned, offering a polite, tight-lipped smile. "Welcome, Miss Carter. I'll have tea sent up." "My mother's name was Rebecca," Madison whispered, the coincidence settling in her stomach like a stone. Ethan stepped in front of her, blocking her view of the woman. He forced her to look up at him. The golden glow had faded from his eyes, returning to that deep, endless black, but the intensity remained. "Common name." He lied. Madison knew he was lying. She could see the tick in his jaw. "Go with her. Get dry. I have a perimeter to secure." "Wait." Madison reached out, grabbing his forearm. His muscles were rock hard beneath the white dress shirt. "You said you'd explain. You can't just lock me in a castle and leave." Ethan looked down at her hand on his arm. He didn't pull away. Instead, he covered her hand with his own. His skin was rough, calloused, a shocking contrast to the silk of his shirt. "I'm not locking you in, Madison, I'm locking them out." He leaned down, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "There are 3 rules while you are here. Memorize them." "I'm not a child," she snapped, though her breath hitched as he stepped closer. "Rule 1, he said, ignoring her protest. "You do not leave the house without me, not for a walk, not for fresh air, never." He took a step closer. Her back hit the wall of the foyer. Rule 2, no photos, no video, no digital footprints. If I see a camera, I break it. And Rule 3, she breathed. Ethan placed his hands on the wall on either side of her head. He loomed over her, a dark titan blocking out the light of the chandelier. He inhaled deeply, taking in the scent of her damp hair. Rule 3, he rumbled, the sound vibrating in her chest. Do not go into the West Wing. That is my territory. If you enter my rooms, I cannot guarantee your safety. From whom? Madison challenged, trying to keep her voice steady despite the trembling in her knees. The hunters. Ethan stared at her mouth. His gaze was hungry, possessive. From me, he said. He pulled away abruptly, the loss of his warmth hitting her like a bucket of ice water. Without looking back, he strode toward the heavy front doors and vanished into the rainy night. The next night, Madison had spent 24 hours pacing. The room she had been given was fit for royalty. A king-sized bed with sheets that felt like spun silk, a bathroom with a soaking tub deep enough to swim in, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the endless, dark forest. But it was a cage, a gilded, velvet-lined cage. She hadn't seen Ethan since the hallway. The housekeeper, Rebecca, brought her meals on a tray and answered none of her questions. Restless, Madison slipped out of her room around midnight. The house was silent, breathing slowly like a sleeping beast. She wandered down the hallway, her bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. She found the library on the ground floor. It was a cavernous room filled with the scent of old paper and leather. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books. They weren't novels. They were histories. The Treaty of 1894, Bloodlines of the Northern Territories, the lunar cycle and psychological shifts. She pulled a heavy, leather-bound book from the shelf, The Anatomy of the Lupus Hominid. Shifters, she whispered, opening the book. The diagrams were detailed, terrifying, human skeletons rearranging, bones breaking and resetting to form the structure of a wolf. A wolf! The sound tore through the silence of the library. It wasn't a diagram. It was real. It was the same howl she had recorded, the same melody that had started this nightmare, but this time, it was close. It was right outside the house. Madison dropped the book. It hit the floor with a thunderous thud. Logic told her to run to her room and lock the door, but the sound, it pulled at her. It tugged at something in her gut, a strange, magnetic thread she couldn't cut. She moved toward the French doors that led to the back terrace. She knew she was breaking Rule 1. She didn't care. She pressed her hand against the glass, peering into the darkness. The storm had passed, leaving a heavy mist clinging to the ground. The moon was full, a bright, watchful eye. And there, standing at the edge of the tree line, was a wolf. It was massive, jet black, blending perfectly with the shadows except for its eyes. They were gold, molten, burning gold. The wolf looked at her. It didn't growl. It simply stared, its chest heaving as if it had just run miles. "Ethan," she whispered to the glass. The wolf threw its head back and let out a short, sharp bark. Then, it turned and vanished into the woods. Madison fumbled with the lock on the door. She needed to know. She needed to see. She opened the door, the cold night air rushing in to sting her face. She took a step onto the stone terrace. "I told you." The voice came from behind her, deep, furious. Madison spun around. Ethan was standing in the doorway of the library, but he wasn't the composed CEO in the suit anymore. He was a wreck. He was wearing only a pair of low-slung sweatpants. His chest was bare, glistening with sweat and rain. His skin was tawny in the moonlight, mapped with scars, silver lines that crisscrossed his ribs and pectorals. And there was blood, a smear of crimson on his shoulder, stark against his skin. "Ethan," she gasped, her eyes widening. "You're bleeding." He stalked toward her, He moved with a limp, favoring his left leg, but he was still fast, too fast. He grabbed her wrist and yanked her back inside, kicking the door shut behind them. He backed her up until she hit the heavy oak table in the center of the library. "I gave you 3 rules," he snarled, his chest heaving. He smelled of rain, pine, and copper blood. The scent was so potent it made Madison dizzy. 3 simple rules, and you break the first one on the second night. "I heard the howl," Madison said, her heart hammering in her throat. "I saw a wolf. Was that you?" Ethan didn't answer. He leaned over her, bracing his hands on the table on either side of her hips, trapping her again. His hair was wet, dripping water onto his collarbones. A droplet rolled down his chest, navigating the ridges of his abdominal muscles, disappearing into the waistband of his pants. Madison watched it, her mouth going dry. "You have no idea what is out there," he rasped. "The things I keep at bay. If you step past that threshold, Madison, I can't protect you." "You're hurt," she said softly. Reaching out, her fingers hovered over the claw marks on his shoulder. They were deep, angry red lines. "What did this—" Ethan flinched as her fingertips grazed his skin. A shudder went through his massive frame. He closed his eyes, his head dropping forward until his forehead rested against hers. "Don't," he groaned. "Don't touch me right now." "Why?" "Because the wolf is still close to the surface," he whispered, his voice ragged. "Because I've spent the last 2 hours hunting down scouts from a rival pack who want to take your head as a trophy. Because I am filled with adrenaline and violence. And you?" He opened his eyes. The gold was back, swirling in the black depths. "You smell like safety. You smell like peace. And I want to ruin it." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and charged. Madison didn't pull away. She felt a heat rising in her own body, an instinct she didn't understand answering his. "Then ruin it," she challenged, the words leaving her mouth before she could stop them. Ethan froze. He looked at her with a mixture of shock and hunger so raw it was terrifying. His hand moved from the table to her waist. His thumb dug into the soft flesh of her hip through her silk pajama top. He pulled her forward, flushing her body against his. His skin was scorching hot, damp and hard as stone. "You are playing a dangerous game. Little photographer, them," he murmured, his nose brushing against hers. "You think because I wear a suit that I am a man? I am not a man." He lowered his head, his lips ghosting over the sensitive spot just below her ear. "I am a predator, and you are the most confusing prey I have ever hunted." "I'm not prey," Madison said breathlessly, tilting her head to give him better access. Her body was betraying her, arching into him. "No," Ethan agreed, his teeth grazing her skin, sending a bolt of electricity straight to her core. "You're something else entirely, something I can't name yet." Suddenly, he pulled back. He wrenched himself away from her as if physically pained. He turned his back to her, gripping the edge of the table until the wood creaked. "Go to your room, Madison," he ordered, his voice harsh, devoid of the seduction from seconds ago. "Lock the door. Do not come out until morning." "Ethan!" "Go!" he roared. The sound wasn't human. It vibrated the books on the shelves. Madison scrambled back. She turned and ran from the library, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't stop until she was in her room, the heavy door locked and bolted. She leaned against the wood, sliding down to the floor. She touched her neck where his breath had been. It still burned. Down in the library, Ethan Blackthorne stared at the closed door. He picked up the book she had dropped, The Anatomy of the Lupus Hominid. He brought the leather cover to his face and inhaled deeply. Her scent was all over it. Peaches, vanilla, and underneath it all, the faint, impossible scent of winter jasmine. The scent of a witch's spell. "Who are you?" he whispered to the empty room, And why does my soul recognize you? 2 weeks later, the isolation was starting to feel less like a prison and more like a routine, a tense, sexually charged routine. Madison had learned the rhythm of the house. Ethan disappeared during the day, presumably running his corporate empire remotely, and returned at dusk. Every evening, they ate dinner together at the long mahogany table. They talked. At first, it was guarded. Madison asked about the pack. Ethan gave vague answers. But slowly, the walls chipped away. She learned he preferred his steak rare, blood rare. She learned he played the cello, a surprising tenderness for a man who could tear throats out with his teeth. She learned that he was 138 years old, though he looked 35, thanks to the slow aging of the alpha bloodline. And every night, the tension grew. It was a physical thing, a thick rope pulling them together. When he passed her the salt, their fingers brushed, and the air would crackle. When he caught her watching him read by the fire, his eyes would darken, and he would shift in his chair. But he never touched her again, not since the library. He kept a deliberate distance, treating her like a fragile vase he was afraid to shatter. It was a Tuesday evening when the bubble burst. Madison was in the kitchen, helping Rebecca, who had warmed up to her slightly dry the dishes. "He likes you," Rebecca said suddenly, wiping a crystal glass. "The master. He hasn't brought anyone here in decades." Madison blushed. "I'm a security risk, Rebecca, not a date." "Is that what he told you?" Rebecca chuckled. "Ethan Blackthorne doesn't protect risks. He eliminates them. If you are here, it is because you are precious." Before Madison could respond, the phone on the wall rang. The landline. Rebecca answered it. Her face went pale. "Understood," she whispered. She dropped the phone. It dangled by its cord, swinging back and forth. "Rebecca?" Madison asked, alarmed. "The perimeter," Rebecca said, her voice trembling. "The alarm didn't sound. They cut the power lines." The lights in the kitchen flickered and died. Pitch blackness swallowed the room. "Get down!" Ethan's voice came from the hallway, roaring through the dark. Before Madison could move, the kitchen window shattered. Crash! A canister flew into the room, skidding across the tile floor. "Gas!" Madison screamed, remembering the attack at her apartment. She grabbed the hem of her shirt and pulled it up over her nose and mouth. She dropped to the floor, crawling toward the pantry. But the gas didn't smell like chemicals this time. It smelled sweet, cloyingly sweet, like rotting flowers. "Wolfsbane!" Rebecca gasped from somewhere in the dark. "They're using aerosolized wolfsbane. It will paralyze him." Madison's heart stopped. Paralyze him. She heard a thud in the hallway, a heavy body hitting the floor. "Ethan!" she screamed. She scrambled up, ignoring the gas. She wasn't a wolf. Wolfsbane shouldn't hurt her. She ran into the hallway. The emergency lights had kicked in dim red bulbs that bathed the corridor in the color of blood. Ethan was on one knee. He was shaking. His skin had turned a sickly shade of gray. Veins stood out black against his neck. He was trying to stand, trying to shift, but his body was failing him. At the end of the hallway, 3 men stood. They were dressed in tactical gear, wearing gas masks. They held rifles, but they weren't firing bullets. They were firing darts. "Take the girl," the lead man said. His voice was distorted by the mask. "Kill the wolf." Ethan let out a roar, a sound of pure defiance, and lunged. Even poisoned, he was fast. He tackled the first man, his claws extending, tearing through Kevlar vest like it was paper. But the other 2 aimed their rifles at him. "Thwip! Thwip!" 2 silver darts embedded themselves in Ethan's back. He convulsed. He fell. No, Madison didn't think. She didn't plan. She grabbed a heavy iron candle holder from the hallway table. She swung it with both hands, putting every ounce of her fear and rage into the motion. Crunch. She hit the second gunman in the side of the head. The helmet absorbed some of the impact, but he stumbled, dropping his rifle. The third gunman turned toward her, raising his weapon. Madison froze. She was staring down the barrel of a gun. Bang! The gunman dropped. Madison blinked. She hadn't been shot. Behind the gunman, standing in the shadows of the foyer, was a woman. She held a smoking pistol. She was tall, with silver hair and eyes that glowed a faint violet. "Move, child," the woman commanded, "before more come." It was Sienna, a guardian from the neighboring pack. Ethan groaned on the floor. He was trying to crawl toward Madison. "Run!" he wheezed, blood foaming at his lips. "Madison, run!" "I'm not leaving you," Madison cried. She dropped the candle holder and fell to her knees beside him. The silver darts were burning his skin, smoke rising from the wounds. "It's silver!" Sienna yelled, running toward them. "Don't touch it! It will burn you too if you have any wolf blood." Madison didn't listen. She grabbed the dart in Ethan's shoulder. Her hand didn't burn, it didn't blister. She felt a strange sensation, a hum, a vibration that traveled up her arm and settled in her chest. She yanked the dart out. She grabbed the second one, yanked it out. The wounds on Ethan's back stopped smoking immediately. Ethan looked up at her, his eyes clearing from the poison fog. He stared at her hands, at her skin, which should be burned but was flawless. "How?" he whispered. "We need to go to the safe room," Madison said, her voice surprisingly steady. She hauled his arm over her shoulder. "Help me stand." With a grunt of effort, Ethan pushed himself up, leaning heavily on her. He was dead weight, pure muscle. But Madison found a strength she didn't know she possessed. They stumbled down the hall, Sienna covering their rear with the pistol. They reached the heavy steel door of the panic room, disguised as a wine cellar. Ethan punched in the code with shaking fingers. The door hissed open. They collapsed inside. As the door sealed shut, locking out the gas and the gunmen, silence returned. Ethan lay on the concrete floor, breathing hard. He reached out, his hand trembling, and grabbed Madison's wrist. He pulled her hand close to his face, inspecting her fingers. No burns, no marks. "Silver doesn't burn you," he murmured, his eyes meeting hers. "I guess I'm just human after all," Madison said, trying to smile, though tears were streaming down her face. Ethan shook his head slowly. A look of profound realization and terror crossed his face. "No, Madison," he said softly. "Humans aren't immune to silver. Humans just don't react to it. But you absorbed the toxicity. I felt it leave me." He pulled her hand against his chest, over his slowing heart. "You didn't just pull the darts out. You healed me." "What does that mean?" Ethan closed his eyes, exhaustion finally taking him. "It means," he whispered as he slipped into unconsciousness, "that you are the daughter of an alpha and something much, much more dangerous." Madison sat in the red light of the panic room, holding the hand of the Wolf King, and realized her life as Madison Carter, the photographer, was officially dead. Whatever she was just waking up. 3 days later, the air in the mountain safe house was thin and cold. It sat 3,000 feet higher than Shadow Pine, a fortress of solitude hidden among the jagged peaks of the Cascades. Madison sat in a leather armchair, her knees pulled to her chest. She watched the steady rise and fall of the chest of the man in the bed. Ethan had been unconscious for 72 hours. Dr. Reeves, a man with spectacles and the weary demeanor of someone who had seen too many supernatural wars, adjusted the IV drip. The fluid was silver, but not the kind that killed. It was a synthesized mineral blend to replenish what the wolfsbane had leached away. "He is waking," Reeves said softly, checking the monitor. "His heart rate is stabilizing." Madison stood up instantly. She walked to the bedside. Ethan's eyelids fluttered. When they opened, there was no grogginess, no confusion, just instant, razor-sharp alertness. He tried to sit up, groaning as his muscles protested. "Easy," Madison said, reaching out to steady him. Ethan flinched. It wasn't a subtle movement. He recoiled from her touch as if her skin were made of branding iron. He scrambled back against the headboard, his breathing ragged. "Ethan," Madison's hand hovered in the air. "Rejected. It's me. You're safe." "Safe," he repeated, his voice a gravelly ruin. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since they met. There was no heat in his gaze, only a cold, terrifying calculation. "You should have let me die, Madison." The words hit her like a physical slap. "Excuse me." "You pulled the silver out," Ethan rasped, "with your bare hands. Do you have any idea what that means?" "It means I saved your life," Madison shouted, anger flaring to cover her hurt. "You're welcome, by the way." "It means," Dr. Reeves interrupted calmly, cleaning his glasses with a handkerchief, "that you are an anomaly, Miss Carter, a biological impossibility." Ethan stared at Madison. "Hybrids change everything," he whispered, the fear evident in his tone. "They break the natural order. People like you, they don't just survive, they end wars, or they start them." Madison looked between the two men. "Stop speaking in riddles. I want the truth. My mother lied to me for 27 years. If you know something, tell me." Ethan nodded to Reeves. "Tell her." The doctor pulled a chair forward. Rebecca Carter was not just an eccentric woman with a tea obsession. Madison, she was a high witch of the covenant, a weaver. A weaver. Someone who can knit magic into DNA. Reeves explained. "She bound your wolf side. She locked it away in a cage of blood magic so deep that not even other wolves could smell it. That's why Ethan was drawn to you but couldn't identify why. You smell human, but your blood sings with power." "And my father?" Madison asked. Her voice shook. "She told me he left. She told me he was a coward." "He was many things," Ethan said, his voice softening slightly, "but he was never a coward." He swung his legs over the edge of the bed. He winced, but forced himself to sit upright, reclaiming his dignity. "Your father was Carden Halifax," Ethan said. The name seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. "He was the alpha of the Obsidian Pack before me. He was the strongest wolf this continent had seen in a century." Madison slumped back against the wall. Carden Halifax. The name sounded foreign, yet strangely familiar, like a song she had heard in the womb. "He died 15 years ago," Reeves added gently. "The official story was a car accident, but in our world, alphas don't die in car accidents." "He was murdered," Madison whispered. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Ethan said. He stood up. He was unsteady, swaying slightly, but he waved off the doctor's help. He walked toward Madison until he was standing a foot away. The fear in his eyes was gone, replaced by a heavy, burdensome sadness. He was murdered because he wanted to unite the packs. He wanted to stop the infighting. Someone didn't want peace. "Who?" Madison asked. "Who killed him?" Ethan went silent. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. He looked away, staring out the window at the snow-capped peaks. "There were 5 alphas at the time who had the motive and the power," Ethan said evasively. "It was a chaotic time. I was barely 20 years old, a soldier in his army." Madison stepped into his line of sight. She forced him to look at her. "You took his job," she said. "You became the alpha after him. You built this empire." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Did you kill him?" The question hung in the air. Dr. Reeves stopped breathing. Ethan looked down at her. His eyes were black pits of emotion. "I loved him like a father. Madison. I would have died for him. In many ways, I have spent the last 15 years dying for him." It wasn't a no, not exactly, but the pain in his voice was so raw, so visceral, that Madison couldn't push further. "So," she said, her voice trembling, "I am the daughter of a dead king and a hiding witch. I am a half-breed freak who can touch silver." "You are not a freak," Ethan growled. He reached out. This time, he didn't pull back. He cupped her face in his large, warm hands. His thumbs brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You are a weapon, Madison, and now that the seal your mother placed on you is breaking, the magic is fading, your scent is changing. Soon, every wolf from here to the East Coast is going to know exactly who you are." "And what will they do?" Ethan leaned his forehead against hers. "They will come for you, some to kneel, some to kill." "And you," she whispered, "what will you do?" Ethan closed his eyes. He inhaled her scent, peaches, rain, and now, the sharp metallic tang of magic unfurling. "I will stand between you and the world," he vowed, "until the day I die." 4 weeks had passed. Recovery was a slow, agonizing process for a wolf. For Ethan, it meant rest, high-calorie meals, and irritability. For Madison, it meant training. "Again," Ethan barked. They were in the clearing behind the safe house. The snow had melted here, leaving a bed of wet pine needles and moss. Madison stood in the center of the clearing, blindfolded. "I feel ridiculous," she muttered, shivering in her windbreaker. "You are blind because you rely too much on your human eyes," Ethan said. His voice moved. He was circling her, prowling. "Humans trust sight. Wolves trust the nose, the ears, the vibration of the earth." "I can't smell anything but pine," Madison complained. "Focus," he commanded. The voice came from her left. Then, a twig snapped to her right. Madison spun around. "There." "Too slow," Ethan whispered directly behind her ear. She jumped, spinning around, but his arms were already around her waist. He pulled her back against his chest. He was warm, solid, an immovable object. "You are trying to think," he murmured into her hair. "Don't think. Feel." He removed the blindfold. The late afternoon sun was filtering through the trees, casting mottled light over the forest floor. "Your mother's magic is fading," Ethan said. Keeping his arms wrapped around her from behind, it felt intimate, possessive. "I can feel your wolf waking up. It's clawing at the door." "It scares me," Madison admitted, leaning back into him. She shouldn't. It was dangerous to be this close to him, especially now that she knew the stakes, but her body craved the contact. "It should," Ethan said. He took her hand and placed it flat over his heart. Through the fabric of his shirt, she could feel the heavy, slow thud, thud, thud of his pulse. "Feel that?" he asked. "That is the rhythm of the pack. When you shift, your heart will match this. Your blood will match mine." He moved her hand lower, to the center of his stomach, where his diaphragm expanded and contracted. "Breathe with me." She inhaled. He inhaled. Their chests rose and fell in unison. "What do you smell now?" he asked softly. Madison closed her eyes. She focused, not on the obvious pine and dirt. She pushed deeper. "I smell," she frowned, "charcoal." "Good." "I smell musk, something sweet." "Better?" "And I smell," her eyes snapped open, "fear." Ethan went still. "From where?" Madison turned in his arms. She pointed toward the trailhead leading down the mountain. "From there, someone is coming, and they are terrified." Ethan smiled. It was a proud, dangerous smile. "Your senses are sharper than some of my lieutenants." A moment later, a black SUV tore up the gravel drive. It was Marcus, Ethan's head of security. He stepped out of the car, looking pale. "Alpha," Marcus said, bowing his head, "we have a problem." They gathered around the kitchen island. Marcus laid out a series of photographs and documents. The leak wasn't contained, Marcus said grimly. Silas Reeves in the northeast knows. Victoria Brennan in the south knows. They know she's Carden's daughter, Ethan asked, his face darkening. They suspect, and they are demanding a summit. They claim you are hoarding a strategic asset in violation of the treaty. Ethan slammed his fist onto the table. She is not an asset. She is a person. To them, she is the blood of the king, Marcus said. Possession of her grants legitimacy to the throne. If Silas gets her, he challenges your rule over the West. Let them come, Ethan snarled. I'll bury them. There's more, Marcus said hesitantly. He glanced at Madison, then back to Ethan. Dominic Cross reached out. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dominic, Ethan said, the name dripping with venom. What does that snake want? He says he has information. Proof. Marcus slid a manila envelope across the table. Proof of who really killed Carden Halifax. Ethan froze. He says he will only give it to Madison, Marcus continued, alone. Absolutely not, Ethan roared. Dominic is a manipulator. He's a mentalist wolf. He twists thoughts. If she goes near him, he'll be inside her head in seconds. But he might know. Madison interrupted. She stared at the envelope. Ethan, if he has proof, it's a lie. Madison, a trap. Ethan grabbed the envelope and tossed it into the fire burning in the hearth. He watched the paper curl and blacken. We do not speak to Dominic Cross. End of discussion. He stormed out of the room. But as Madison watched the envelope burn, she saw a corner of a photograph that had slid out before the fire took it. It was a grainy, black and white photo of her father, and standing next to him, laughing, was a young Ethan. And behind them both, a shadow, a figure obscured by a veil. 2 days later, Madison sat in a booth at the back of a roadside diner, 20 miles from the safe house. She had snuck out. It had been terrifyingly easy. She used the skills Ethan had taught her, masking her scent with mud, moving against the wind, avoiding the sensors. She wasn't sure if she was getting better, or if Ethan's guards were getting sloppy. The bell above the door jingled. A man walked in. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a movie star. High cheekbones, sandy blonde hair, and eyes that were a startling, piercing blue. He wore a designer trench coat and moved with liquid grace. Dominic Cross. He slid into the booth opposite her. He smiled, and it felt like looking into the sun, bright, warm, and blinding. You look just like him, Dominic said softly. You have Carden's chin, and your mother's defiant eyes. Cut the charm, Madison said, gripping her coffee mug. You said you had proof. Direct. I like that. Dominic leaned back. Ethan warned you about me, didn't he? Said I was a liar? A mind reader. Are you? I have talents, Dominic admitted, but I don't need to read your mind to know you are confused. You are living with a man who has kept secrets from you from the moment you met. He protects me, Madison said defensively. Does he? Dominic reached into his coat pocket. He placed a small digital recorder on the table. Or does he curate your reality? What is this? A recording from the night Carden died, Dominic said. Audio only. It was taken from the black box of the car Carden was supposedly driving. Madison stared at the device. Why give this to me? What do you want? I want chaos. Dominic smiled, his eyes flashing. The current peace is boring. Ethan is a stagnant king. But you are a wild card. I want to see what you do when you know the truth. He stood up. Listen to it, or don't. But ask yourself, Madison, why was Ethan the only one to benefit from your father's death? He walked away, leaving the check and the recorder. Madison sat there for a long time. Finally, she pressed play. Static, the sound of rain. Then, her father's voice, deep, booming, laughing. We're almost there. Ethan, history is made tonight. Then, Ethan's voice, younger, higher pitched. Are you sure about this? Carden. Once we sign this treaty with the humans, there is no going back. Fear is for the weak, boy. Carden laughed. Then, a sound, a screech of tires, metal twisting. And then, amidst the wreckage, a voice spoke. It wasn't Carden. It wasn't the crash. It was Ethan. I'm sorry, Carden, but you're going too fast. The pack isn't ready for your vision. Then, the sound of a single gunshot. Click. The recording ended. Madison sat in the diner, the blood draining from her face. I'm sorry. A gunshot. Ethan hadn't just failed to save him. He had been there. He had finished him off. Or had he? The audio was grainy. Context was missing, but Dominic's seed had been planted, and it was taking root deep in her heart. Madison slipped back into the safe house just as the sun was setting. She made it to her room, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would bruise her ribs. She hid the recorder in the toe of her winter boot in the closet. She turned around and gasped. Ethan was sitting in the armchair in the corner of her room. The lights were off. Where were you? He asked. His voice was terrifyingly calm. I went for a walk. Madison lied. I needed air. I stayed within the perimeter. Ethan stood up. He walked toward her slowly. He stopped inches from her. He leaned down and inhaled. He sniffed her hair, her neck, her hands. You smell like diner coffee, he said softly. Madison stiffened. You smell like old grease, he continued, and you smell like him. He pulled back, his face twisting into a mask of betrayal and fury. His eyes flashed gold. Cologne, he growled, sandalwood and narcissism. Dominic. Ethan, let me explain. You went to see him, Ethan shouted, the sound shaking the walls. After I told you not to, after I warned you. I needed answers, Madison yelled back. And he gave me one. He gave me a recording. Ethan, I heard you. I heard you apologize to my father before he died. Silence crashed into the room. Ethan went still. The rage evaporated, replaced by something much worse, a cold, hollow desolation. You heard a recording, he repeated dully. Did you kill him? Madison asked, tears streaming down her face. Did you shoot him? Ethan looked at her. He looked at the woman he had claimed, the woman he was falling in love with, and he saw the doubt in her eyes, the lack of trust. If you believe that, he said, his voice breaking, then we have nothing. Tell me it's a lie, she begged. Just say it. I can't, Ethan whispered. He turned and walked out of the room. He didn't deny it. He didn't explain it. He just left. And for the first time, Madison felt truly, completely alone in a house full of wolves. She sank onto the bed, the silence deafening. She had sought the truth, but the truth was a knife, and she had just twisted it into the only heart that beat for her. The night at the safe house was suffocating. The air felt too thick to breathe, laden with the heavy weight of unspoken words. Madison didn't sleep. She lay on top of the duvet, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling beams. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard that gunshot. Bang. And Ethan's voice. I'm sorry, Carden. Around 3:00 a.m., the silence broke, not with a sound, but with a sensation, a creeping coldness that started at her toes and worked its way up. Madison sat up. The door to her room was cracked open. She knew she had closed it. She got up, moving silently across the floorboards. The hallway was empty, but there was a light coming from the study down the hall, Ethan's temporary office. She shouldn't go. She should pack a bag and run. But she was Carden Halifax's daughter, and if her father wasn't a coward, neither was she. She crept toward the study. The door was ajar. Inside, Ethan was sitting at the desk. He wasn't working. He was holding a glass of amber liquid, staring into the fireplace where the embers were dying. He looked diminished. The formidable Alpha King looked like a man crushed under the weight of a mountain. On the desk in front of him lay a gun, an old revolver, the silver finish tarnished. "You're loud when you think, Madison," Ethan said without turning around. Madison froze in the doorway. "I didn't mean to—" "Come in." He interrupted. He took a drink, emptying the glass. "If you're going to judge me, do it to my face." Madison walked into the room. She kept her distance, hugging her arms around herself. "I'm not judging you. I'm trying to understand." "Understanding is a luxury," Ethan muttered. He spun the empty glass on the desk. "In my world, survival is the only currency." He picked up the revolver. Madison flinched. "This was your father's," Ethan said, weighing the weapon in his hand. "He gave it to me when I turned 18, said a wolf's teeth are for killing, but a gun is for mercy." He turned the chair to face her. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with exhaustion. "Dominic's recording," he said quietly. "It was real. I did say those words, and there was a gunshot." Madison's breath hitched. "Why?" "Because Carden was dying," Ethan said. The words came out like broken glass. "The crash, it pinned him, metal through his chest. He was drowning in his own blood. He knew help wasn't coming in time." Ethan looked down at the gun. "He begged me, Madison. He ordered me as his alpha to end it, to not let him suffer, to not let the enemy capture him alive and torture the secrets of the covenant out of him." Tears spilled over Madison's cheeks. You mercy killed him." "I tried," Ethan whispered. "I put the gun to his head. I said I was sorry. I pulled the trigger." He looked up at her, his gaze piercing. "But the gun jammed. It misfired. I couldn't do it. I threw the gun away and then—" He shuddered, reliving a nightmare. Then the third party arrived, the shadow, the figure in the veil. I was thrown from the wreck by a blast of magic I'd never felt before. I watched from the ditch, paralyzed. As it walked up to Carden, it didn't shoot him, it drained him. Drained him. Took his light, took his power, left a husk. Ethan's hand clenched into a fist. Dominic edited the tape. He cut out the misfire. He cut out the scream. Madison crossed the room. She didn't think about the danger. She didn't think about the lies. She saw a man in agony. She reached out and covered his fist with her hand. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked softly. "Because," Ethan said, his voice trembling as he looked at her hand on his. "How do you tell a daughter that her father's soul was eaten, that I failed to protect him not from a bullet, but from a monster?" "You were 20, Madison said. "You were a kid." "I was his second," Ethan argued fiercely. "And now I am failing his daughter, because that monster, the Veiled One, it's not gone. Madison, it's back, and it's looking for the last piece of Carden's power." He looked up at her. "You." The revelation hit Madison hard. The reason for the secrecy, the overprotectiveness, the desperation. It wasn't just politics. It was a serial killer who ate souls. "I found a file," Madison said, her voice steadying as the pieces clicked into place. "In the library at Shadow Pine, the Halifax incident, there was a note in your handwriting." Ethan closed his eyes. "If it comes for me, find Madison." "You knew," she said. "You knew I was the bait." "No." Ethan stood up abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor. He grabbed her shoulders. "Not bait. You are the key. The magic your mother wove into you. It's not just camouflage, it's a lock. Carden hid something inside you before he died. A failsafe." "What?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, frustration radiating off him. "But the Veiled One wants it. And if we don't figure out what it is, everyone dies." Madison looked into his eyes. She saw the truth there now, naked, raw, and terrifying. "Okay," she said. No more secrets, no more lies. No more lies, Ethan agreed. He leaned in. For a moment, she thought he was going to kiss her. The pull was there, stronger than gravity, but he pulled back, respecting the line she had drawn earlier. Get some sleep, he said hoarsely. Tomorrow, we go to the council. If we are going to fight a ghost, we need an army. The helicopter ride to Aspen had been silent. Ethan held Madison's hand the entire way, his thumb tracing the veins in her wrist, grounding her. As they descended into the subterranean hangar, Madison saw them, the entourage. Dozens of sleek black cars, men and women in suits, radiating power. It looked like a G7 summit, if the world leaders had fangs. Stay close to me, Ethan murmured as the rotor slowed. Do not make eye contact with Silas. Do not let Victoria touch you. Got it, Madison said, straightening her spine. Don't pet the scary dogs. Ethan let out a short, sharp laugh. It was the first time she'd heard him genuinely laugh in days. Exactly. The meeting hall was a circular amphitheater carved from gray stone. 5 thrones sat on a raised dais. The rest of the room was filled with spectators, delegates, enforcers, and witnesses from the supernatural community. Ethan led Madison to the center of the floor. The murmurs started immediately. She looks just like him. Can you smell it? The hybrid blood abomination. Ethan snarled, a low rumble that silenced the room instantly. He guided Madison to a chair next to his podium, then ascended the dais to take his seat the central throne. The other alphas were already seated. Silas Reeves was thin, pale, with eyes like chips of ice. Victoria Brennan was stunning, with cascading red hair and a predatory smile. Dominic Cross sat relaxed, legs crossed, looking bored. He winked at Madison when she caught his eye. "We are in session," Ethan announced, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the room. "Let's skip the formalities," Silas said, his voice dry and crackling. "You harbor a hybrid, Blackthorne, a breach of natural law. Surrender her to the council for study." "She's not a specimen, Silas," Ethan retorted. "She's a member of my pack, and she is under my personal protection." "Personal," Victoria purred. "Is that what we're calling it? I smell your scent all over her. Ethan, it's quite pungent. Have you claimed her?" "Not yet," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "Then she is fair game," Dominic interjected lazily. "By the laws of the Covenant, an unclaimed wolf without a pack is free for the taking. I challenge for custody." The room erupted in shouts. Ethan stood up. "I deny the challenge." "On what grounds?" Dominic stood, his playfulness vanishing. "She is Carden's blood. She belongs to the realm, not to you." "She belongs to herself." The voice rang out clear and angry. Madison stood up. She walked to the center of the circle, standing directly beneath the overhead lights. "I am Madison Carter," she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength with every word. "I am the daughter of Carden Halifax and Rebecca Carter, and I am tired of men deciding my fate." Silence fell. "You want to know what I am?" Madison asked, looking at Silas. "I am the thing that healed an alpha from wolfsbane poisoning in 30 seconds. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Silas leaned forward. His interest piqued. "You want to know who killed my father?" She turned to Dominic. "It wasn't Ethan. It was something else. Something that is still out there." She pointed to the empty space in the room. "There is a killer hunting us, the veiled one. And while you sit here fighting over custody like children, it is gathering strength." An old man stood up from the spectator benches. He leaned on a cane made of twisted hawthorn wood. It was Theron, the oldest living wolf, an oracle. "The girl speaks truth," Theron rasped. His eyes were milky white, blind to the world but seeing everything else. "The veil is tearing. The shadow walks among us." Theron pointed a gnarled finger at Madison. But she is not just the key. She is the lock. If she dies, the prison opens. If she lives, the shadow starves. Ethan vaulted off the dais. He landed beside Madison, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You heard the oracle," Ethan declared. "She is essential. Any attack on her is an act of treason against our entire race." Silas sat back, calculating. "Fine. She remains under your protection, Blackthorne, but only if she can prove she is one of us." "What do you mean?" Madison asked. Victoria smiled, showing too many teeth. "The moon run. 3 days from now. The full moon. She must shift. If she cannot shift, she is human, and humans are not allowed to know our secrets. She will be mind-wiped and exiled." "She has never shifted," Ethan protested. "It's too soon." "Those are the terms," Dominic said, shrugging. "Sink or swim, princess." Ethan looked at Madison. Fear was etched into his features. Shifting for the first time was agony. It was dangerous. Many didn't survive it. "I accept," Madison said. "Madison, no," Ethan whispered. "I accept," she repeated louder. "I will run with the pack." The night before the moon, they returned to Shadowpine in silence. The weight of the ultimatum hung over them. Ethan paced the library. "You shouldn't have agreed. The first shift, it breaks bones. Madison, it tears muscle. Without guidance, the pain can stop your heart." "Then guide me," Madison said. She stood by the fire, bathed in the orange glow. She looked ethereal and terrified. "I can't guide you through the bond unless—" Ethan trailed off. He stopped pacing. He looked at her. "Unless what?" "Unless we are mated," Ethan said quietly. "Unless the bond is sealed." Madison's heart skipped a beat. "You mean the claiming?" "Yes." Ethan walked toward her. The air between them grew heavy, charged with static. "If I mark you, our souls are tethered. I can take your pain. I can share my strength. I can anchor you so the wolf doesn't swallow your mind." "But—" He hesitated, his hand hovering near her cheek. "It is permanent. Madison, once I bite you, you are mine. Forever. No other wolf will touch you. Your life becomes mine. My enemies become yours." Madison looked up at him. She saw the man who had tried to save her father, the man who had watched over her for years from the shadows, the man who looked at her like she was the sunrise. "I'm already yours, Ethan," she whispered. "I think I have been since I heard that howl." Ethan let out a ragged breath. He didn't wait. He crashed his mouth onto hers. The kiss was explosive. It was hunger and desperation and weeks of pent-up longing. He lifted her up, her legs wrapping around his waist instantly. He carried her to the rug before the fire, lowering her down, covering her body with his massive frame. "Are you sure?" he demanded, his voice guttural, his eyes flashing gold. "Tell me to stop, Madison, because in a second, I won't be able to." "Don't stop," she breathed, pulling his face down to hers. He stripped her clothes off with reverence and haste. His hands worshipped her skin, mapping every curve when skin touched skin bare. Hot, electric, it felt like coming home. Ethan kissed down her jawline, lingering at the sensitive cord of her neck. He found the spot, the junction where the shoulder meets the neck, the claiming spot. "This will hurt," he warned against her skin. "Do it." Ethan growled, a sound that came from the depths of his chest, his canines elongated, sharp and gleaming. He bit down. Madison cried out, arching her back. It was sharp, stinging pain, like a brand. But immediately following the pain came a rush of endorphins, a flood of warmth. And then, him. His mind flooded into hers. She felt his love, vast and terrifying like an ocean. She felt his fear of losing her. She felt his devotion to the memory of her father. His voice echoed in her head, not spoken, but thought. I am here. I feel you. She thought back. Ethan pulled back, licking the drop of blood from the wound. The bite mark was already healing, leaving a silvery scar in the shape of a crescent moon. Mine? He growled possessively. Yours, she echoed. They moved together then, a rhythm as old as time. It wasn't just sex, it was emerging, with every touch. The bond solidified. Madison felt his pleasure as her own. She felt his strength pouring into her, fortifying her bones for the shift to come. When the climax hit, it wasn't just physical. It was a supernova of light behind her eyes, a howling chorus of two souls singing in harmony. They lay entangled in the afterglow, the fire dying down to embers. Ethan stroked her hair, his other arm heavy across her waist. I love you, he said. The words were simple, quiet, and absolute. I love you too, Madison murmured, drifting toward sleep. But as she closed her eyes, a chill went through the bond. Ethan sat up instantly. Did you feel that? Feel what? A void, Ethan said, scanning the room, like something missing. He looked at the window. The glass was frosted over, but on the outside, pressed against the pane, was a handprint. A handprint that was melting the frost not with heat, but with rot. The shadow was here.
To be continued.